Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 13, Episode 110. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. And Dave, all of a sudden, a very busy Wednesday. How you doing?
Yeah, I got busy right out of the chute there, and they added to the coaching staff after all. And here we are, April the 5th, right? And we have some news to pass along there to get things going.
We do. Bright and early, Pittsburgh Steelers announcing on Wednesday morning they made an outside coaching hire, bringing in Glenn Thomas as a new assistant offensive coach. The exact duties were not spelled out by the team. Thomas, most recently, the offensive coordinator of Arizona State, and he's been a long time college OC at places like Temple and Baylor and UNLV, basically a pass game quarterback background. So what that role is, I'm not quite sure. Pittsburgh has two quarterback coaches already in Mike Sullivan and David Corley. So, is Thomas's role kind of that pass game helper or something else? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, look, he was also at Temple in 2015 and 16. Was he there trying to recruit? Was he possibly there? Was that the same time that they possibly were recruiting Kenny Pickett?
That's a good question. I don't have the whole timeline in front of me. I know obviously Temple was recruiting him, correct?
Yeah, because Matt Rule was there, right? So that sounds about the right timeline, right? Because when did Kenny Pickett start at Pitt?
He committed in 2016. So yeah, there's probably some sort of history there.
All right, interesting. And let's see, he went on to Baylor after Temple. Was the co-offensive coordinator there and quarterbacks coach, looks like. UNLV for a couple seasons, 2020 and 2021 as offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. And as you mentioned, Arizona State offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach last season. You go all the way back to, he has spent some time in the NFL with the Falcons and, kind of helped with Matty Ice, right? Matt Ryan. Mm-hmm. During his time there. So, yeah, we'll have to see. Maybe this is some sort of passing coordinator addition here.
Yeah, I'm not, if it's not that, because again, I'm still wondering about receiver coach. I've been kind of talking about that for a while to give Frisman Jackson some help, especially in training camp when you have, 10, 11, 12 receivers in camp and, as Frisman Jackson alone going to coach that group and, someone going to help Danny Smith out on special teams. So not 100% sure what that role is going to be for Thomas, but add in that coaching staff that's already pretty small, so at least add a different set of eyes. I'm certainly in favor of that.
Yeah, sure. No problem so far as I can tell. I haven't dug deep into them, obviously, this morning.
Same. Yeah. One other addition, and really, I guess we shouldn't call it an addition, but just kind of a formal announcement made public to you and I, but Gerald Alexander is now listed as the Steelers' assistant defensive backs coach. And while that's news to us, evidently he was actually brought on board to Pittsburgh at some point last year in some sort of unofficial role, never announced by the team, never listed on the team page, on their website, their media guide, anything like that. But do want to note that now in official capacity, Gerald Alexander, former NFL safety second-round pick back in the mid-2000s, is officially on staff as the assistant DBs coach.
Yeah, going back through some stuff on Twitter this morning, found a post from Cameron Wolf back, I think, ahead of the game last season between the Dolphins and the Steelers, and it shows Gerald Alexander in Steelers gear, kind of messing around pregame and saying hello to some of his former players, Javon Holland, Brandon Jones, and Xavier Howard. Not sure how we missed that one, but certainly did. And the team just added, like we said, the only reason that it's become news this morning is because they added him to the database, on the team media site this morning there while we're looking for info on Glenn Thomas there. So interesting development there. As you mentioned, not a new one, but kind of a new name to us, just, because it hasn't been out there.
Right. Officially announced, I guess, is the way that we can frame that. And I don't know if his role is changing at all compared to last year. It's good to give Grady Brown that additional help, but like receiver with the secondary, it's such a large group of guys. You want maybe an additional coach to help out in practice. Pittsburgh in recent years has often had two defensive back coaches, whether it was Terrell Austin and Tom Bradley or Terrell Austin and Grady Brown, and just to help kind of work things in practice. Oftentimes when they had to, one guy would take the safeties, one guy would take the corners and work on individual drills tailored for those positions. If you have just one guy doing that, which is kind of what was happening last year with just Grady Brown. Of course, there was Austin, but he was in a different role as DC. Maybe a bit too much on one guy's shoulders just to manage their group again, especially in the summer with a huge roster. That's a lot on one guy's plate. So smart there by the Steelers.
All right, good explanation there.
All right, got a lot of pre-draft visit news here to recap for you guys. And
they've been busy.
they have been, and today they are bringing the beef. I think it's at least 1,000 pounds of prospect coming to Pittsburgh and already in Pittsburgh in Baylor nose tackle Siaki Ika, Florida offensive guard Osiris Torrance, and Oklahoma offensive tackle Anton Harrison. And so again, the theme of the offseason, trenches, O-line, D-line, and that continues with the visits today.
Yeah, and go over some of the other visits that we've had the last couple of days here.
Yeah, just give me 1 second to pull everything up so I'm not missing any names. But again, it's kind of that similar theme of big guys up front. Chandler Zavala, who we just had talked about earlier, I think this week on the podcast, he's coming in for a visit. So you see Pat Meyer go to that NC State Pro Day. Zavala reportedly had a good workout. Now he's coming into Pittsburgh for a visit. Obviously, Pittsburgh impressed by what they saw at that Wolfpack workout. Other names here in recent days in terms of big guys up front, that might be the list for them. In terms of other positions, you have NC State safety Tanner Engel coming in. He's a versatile guy, can play free safety, can play nickel. One guy I was really happy to see kind of go into the skill positions, Jaden Reed, the receiver from Michigan State. I know that's Tyler Wise's guy from the Senior Bowl. I've been a fan of Reed. I think he's a really good blend for that slot receiver who's not that small slot, not a huge guy, but versatile blocker, return value. So I'm really ecstatic personally to see Jaden Reed come in for a top 30.
Yeah, and let's see. They Keanu Benton, who we I think knew was coming in, that happened on the 3rd, right? Or 4th?
3rd, yes.
Okay, and Tuli Tuipulotu, the edge rusher out of USC, was also on the 3rd. Julius Brents, I think we had talked about him coming in. He came in on the 3rd. Deontay Banks, obviously the highly ranked cornerback out of Maryland, was yesterday. And as you mentioned, Engel along with Zavala on Tuesday there. So, yeah, they're looking at obviously. I mean, really. Offensive line, defensive line, wide receiver, cornerbacks, and a couple of safeties here, along with an edge.
Right, and a quarterback. I should mention the quarterback as well, Clayton Tune from Houston. I know that Ian Rappaport tweeted that, enlisted Pittsburgh among several teams. Tune getting a lot of pre-draft interest here late in this process, and he was listed among workouts and visits, but the Steelers never do pre-draft workouts. They do not do private workouts. I know that was under Kevin Colbert. I very much believe that it's not changing under Omar Khan, and so I'm going to safely assume that's a visit for Clayton Tune, who was 5 years with Houston, threw 40 touchdowns last year, one of the top producing quarterbacks in their history. And so we're talking about this team having 2 quarterbacks on the roster right now. How do they get to 3 and 4? They always bring 4 to camp. You're looking at late round draft pick, undrafted free agent, potentially one of those paths, and then probably one of the not that they're officially in this vein, but the feeder leagues, the XFL, USFL, something like that is probably how they're going to round out that room.
And we don't know exactly the specifics or what maybe might become of this, but Broderick Martin out of Western Kentucky seems to be, and we're not 100% sure, seems to be kind of confirming a kind of a loose report out there claiming that he has a top 30 visit with the Steelers upcoming. Now that would make sense based on some of the beef that we've seen them bring in, right? What is he, 6'5", 336 pounds, something like that, out of Western Kentucky. Now I went back and listened to his real brief pro day, his post pro day workout interview, and the Steelers were one of the teams that he rattled off in mentioning having some sort of contact with him, but he did not. It was like, I don't know, 2 minute 45-second media session. He didn't differentiate though whether he was talking about having a pre-draft visit or not, like that. So maybe that's one to maybe look at. To let's see, today's Wednesday. I would imagine probably 3 more guys will be brought in on Thursday, and they don't generally do pre-draft visits on Friday. The Steelers, do they? Or
I don't know for sure, but it would make sense if they kind of took Friday off.
Right. So we'll see if they bring, if Broderick Martin is part of maybe the 3 others, because they usually try to wrap up those pre-draft visits a couple of weeks ahead of the draft too. So might this be the last, I don't know, or is next week the last week when it comes to that? I don't know. It's either this week or next week, I'm pretty sure, as far as pre-draft visits ending. But we've got a nice long list of them already, that's for sure. How many in total? 22 out of 30, we think?
Yeah, 22 of 30 reported or officially announced, plus Joey Porter Jr., who was local, plus potentially Martin, as you mentioned. And yeah, the history says usually their last visit comes about 7 to 10 days before the draft. So I would say next week is probably going to be more or less the final week, maybe the week after, very early, just depending on schedules, who's available. If a guy has visits somewhere else, you're just never quite sure. Yeah, I watched some of Martin last night, put on a game in 2021 against App State, and he's big, he's powerful, used on some stunts, good effort guy, had 2 sacks in that game, not a great athlete overall, but I think he's got some balance, stays on his feet against cut block, so got to watch more of him. Not a highly productive guy. He spent 2 years at Western Kentucky, was a North Alabama transfer, so some intrigue there as a very late round type plugger.
I watched a little bit of Clayton Tune yesterday afternoon in between some things. And I think the big thing that stuck out to me about him was kind of the pocket presence and the escape and his ability, his escapability and ability kind of to make some throws on the move. So it's got probably medium arm strength overall. You look back at his last 2 seasons and really high completion percentages after not so great completion percentages, I think, his first couple of years there. But that stuck out because how many times have we talked since last year, the Steelers talking about, completion percentage and accuracy and things of that nature. So I didn't take a deep look at him, just kind of a surface view. But what stuck out was kind of the accuracy, the pocket presence, and the ability to get outside, avoid the rush kind of thing, and go from there. His delivery, especially on some deep balls that I watched, I kind of a more over the top, I think, kind of release on the little bit that I saw. And I got to admit, there was one throw in particular. It was a great throw to who was that small receiver? Tank Dell over there at Houston. The release over the top kind of reminded me of Mason Rudolph. Now, once again, just a couple of throws that I saw in there. But who else did I kind of peer in on? We've obviously known a little bit about a lot of these other guys. Oh, Anton Harrison, versatile guy, played left and right tackle at Oklahoma. Kind of borderline. His arms are 34 and an eighth, right? Right around in there. But he is a little squattier, I think, at 6'4", right?
Yeah, he's 6'04", 3. The arm length, I think, is good. Now, he's not the house that, day one Jones is, but you're 33 is the typical benchmark. To me, 34 at 6'4" is really good length for the position. I think the overall size profile has not been, as quite consistent with some of the really big guys Pittsburgh has taken a look at. But I think he does have length. He's young. He's 21 years old. He does have experience, 3-year starter, good athlete overall. I think he's got a little bit of nasty in terms of run blocker, just has to get more functionally strong and be a more consistent run blocker, keep his pad level down. But you do wonder, does he quite fit what Pittsburgh's looking for? Obviously, they're interested in him to some degree, but I think the length is really good on him.
Okay. What is it? And it's still, we still got a handful of visitors are going to come in. Hopefully some of those will be tackles. But, and I guess it depends on what you view Cody Mock as. I think we both kind of view him as an interior guy at the next level, a versatile interior guy who can obviously play tackle after he played tackle at North Dakota State. But Dawan Jones and Anton Harrison, really the only two guys. Now, they obviously think that Paris Johnson and Broderick Jones are probably going to be off the board by the time that it gets to them. Will we see a couple more tackles brought in? And is this kind of shaping up to maybe a second or third round tackle instead of obviously a first round tackle?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I think obviously, I think they're going to take a tackle. I don't know, within those top 3 picks, where that's going to be is harder for me to determine. Will a Darnell Wright come in, being that they weren't at that pro day in terms of Tomlin Kahn, but, Pat Meyer was there, or have they seen enough of him because he was at the Senior Bowl? So, there's a lot of ways that this thing could go. Harrison was an underclassman, so less exposure to him. They were not in terms of Tomlin Kahn or Meyer at that pro day. So you can see why Harrison's brought in. So there's always kind of an art to how they structure their visits. It's not solely based off of interest. It's based off of how much have we seen of this guy and when do we get to see this guy or not get to see this guy, and based on circumstances. So there's kind of a bit of a game to it, but we'll see if any more tackles come in.
Yeah, and I also wonder maybe if Brian Brzee will be brought in, defensive lineman out of Clemson, obviously, as well, too. Now, they do know a lot about him, you would think already. Tomlin was at that pro day over a year ago, and there's a picture of him, talking to Brzee, and obviously they were at the Clemson pro day again this year. So a guy that they probably know really, really well at this point.
Yeah, and they probably had a pro day dinner with him. I know that's not been made official, but they talked with Miles Murphy, I think, and Trenton Simpson. I got to think Brzee was part of that group. I wonder if this team will bring in any more day 3 guys, because they've been kind of top heavy in the second round, third round, day 2 candidates. A couple of these guys have been more later round names here in Tune, in Ingle. I think that's kind of basically the list, though, maybe Charlie Jones, but I wonder if they're going to round out this list by bringing in some more day 3 type candidates. Mark Robinson was a pre-draft visitor last year that probably helped push him to be that pick in the 7th round. So I wonder if that might be the way they go, just to kind of round things out.
And no inside linebackers in so far, or off the ball linebackers so far, right?
Yeah, and that's probably going to tell you, based on the history, that they're not going to draft an off-ball linebacker high, especially after you see them obviously revamp that room entirely with Cole Holcomb, with Landon Roberts. You got Robinson sitting there, so maybe they draft one late. But I think a Herbig that you mentioned, I think on that Monday live stream's a really good candidate for Pittsburgh in, say, round 4. But based off the history, based off the visits, I'm not expecting an off-ball linebacker to go high.
And then we also had Curry at the Tulane Pro Day as well, too. Right, for Dorian Williams.
Right. But will Williams go a bit too high for where Pittsburgh ultimately takes one? You can't rule it out, obviously, with Curry being there. But I think all those things combined, Curry being at pro days for more mid-round type guys and the visits. Now, I know that they were at Iowa for Jack Campbell, and I love Jack Campbell as much as anybody, but I just don't think that's the most likely or even the likely scenario right now.
All right, so we'll keep monitoring this list for the rest of the pre-draft visit process. And the Steelers also finally got around to announcing a few signings that we knew about, right?
Yep, everything is signed, sealed, delivered. That's for Zach Gentry, DeMonte Casey, and also the outsiders in Keanu Neal and Braden Fehoko, I think, was the other one too. Now, we just got the actual total money on Keanu Neal at 2 years, $4.25 million. And so that's a very cheap deal for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, don't know how it's exactly structured just yet, especially with it being kind of a 4.2. I kind of wonder if they gave him maybe $1 million signing bonus, $1.25 million base salary in 2023, and then a $2 million base salary in 2024. It wouldn't be an equal split that way. It would give him $2.25 million in 2023, and then another $2 million there's 6 different ways you could divide this thing up, to make it work. But if it is $1 million signing bonus and a base salary of $1.25 million, that would put his cap number at $1.75 million for 2023. Now, obviously, they could make it more of an even split if they wanted to, and that would, I guess what I'm getting at is at this point, I wouldn't think that his 2023 cap number would be greater than $1.75 million.
Okay, gotcha. Good deal on that. And obviously that's less than what DeMonte Casey got, reportedly 2 years, $6 million. So what do you make of all that? Does that mean anything to you, Dave, in terms of getting less than Casey?
At most, I expected him to get what Casey got. Is it just a deal is a deal, and that's that's as far as they got in the bargaining process. I still think kind of our analysis on this is that Neal's going to be more of the box guy, whereas Casey will be more of the dime guy. But maybe they have different intentions there.
Yeah, and we'll have to see how things play out post-draft, if they do add anybody to that room or not. So speaking of contracts, you laid out a potential, what a TJ Watt restructure could look like. You want to just kind of walk us through those numbers and anything else relevant to that situation?
Yeah, and that was just more so because we get questions, it seems like every offseason, of how a restructure works, and the actual details really shouldn't be surprising, especially if it is a full restructure here. But I just I just go through and I try to explain what exactly I expect to happen here, and that would be taking all but $1.08 million of his $20 million that he's due in a base salary in 2023 and turning that into a signing bonus, and then prorating that $18.92 million out over the 3 years of the deal, and in doing so, just basically showing what his cap charges will be in 2023, 2024, and how it should decrease if they did do a full restructure, how it should decrease this 2023 cap charge by a little more than $12.6 million. It's not a matter, in my opinion, of if they're going to do this. It's just a matter, as I've said all offseason, of when and how, if indeed it'll be a full restructure. If it's not a full restructure, then it's just gonna be pretty damn close to it, and it's gonna be because they want round even numbers, in this thing. I guess technically you could take his base salary down to $1.1 million instead of $1.08 million, or for whatever reason. But just kind of the outlook with cash spending and cap spending based on what we expect them to have to be able to afford going on closer to week 1 of the season. It makes a lot of sense that there's going to be a restructure. It's going to happen with TJ Watt, and it's more than likely going to be a full restructure. Now, the only thing that could obviously change that is any last kind of minute roster cuts, and how many of these guys in the current rule of 51 with a significant salary might be jettisoned. Somebody like an Akella Witherspoon would probably still lead that list. It will be interesting. I mean, there's been no signs that the team is going to extend the contract of Mitchell Trubisky, right? But
right,
not. As we outlined several weeks ago, if they did do something like that, it could potentially lower his cap number down. So even if you did that, it still feels like some sort of restructure with Watt will happen. And from where I sit right now, it's going to be a full restructure. But I just wanted to kind of walk people through the process. Now, last year, the restructure of Watt happened right before the start, in September, right before the start of the regular season, and it wasn't a full one. They didn't have to do a full one on him last year. So might they be able to, some of the other matriculation that'll happen through this offseason, get around? I mean, it's possible, but even so, I would expect some sort of restructure with Watt at some point, and I tend to believe it might happen right before the start of the regular season again.
Which is what happened last year, right?
Right.
September 7th was the restructure. So
it's like the 3rd or the 7th or something like that.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, there's no reason to be – there was some commenter that thought that TJ Watt was trying to strong-arm this team by not restructuring until, Derek Watts re-signed. Nothing like that is accurate, correct?
Oh, yeah, look, and sometimes, as Joel Corey has told me in the past, a lot of teams, including the Steelers, will sometimes put in these bigger contracts like this that they have the right to restructure at will, So now, do we know that that's for sure the case with TJ? Look, it's not going to be related to him trying to strong arm the team into re-signing Derek Watt or anything like that.
Right. And so in terms of offseason contract things to look for, it's that. Is there anything else? I mean, obviously there's the Alex Highsmith extension possibility. Is there anything else on your radar this summer?
No, other than, once again, we'll see what happens with Mitch Trubisky based on what Omar Khan had said, right? Kind of want him to be around past this season, and we'll see if they're able to get anything done in regard to him. But other than that, the Highsmith thing seems to be, that's another thing I think I've written about since we last talked on the podcast, right?
Oh, yeah.
Forgot to hit on that. And, I had that post back in, when was it? January, kind of projecting what Alex Highsmith's market value might be this offseason. And as part of that, statistical study and tape study, I came in somewhere between a new money average for him between 15 million and 17.25 million. And looking at it a little closer and looking at the highest paid edge rushers, currently on over the cap, and trying to slot based on my value, based on the slotting, and based on where and I know Cameron Hayward's not an edge rusher, but the Steelers seem to have this kind of weird hierarchy. You know what I'm saying? Now look, TJ Watt obviously exceeded the Hayward number, as did Minkah Fitzpatrick, but both those guys are tops in their positions in the NFL, correct?
Yeah, those ones were going to happen no matter what the hierarchy said. They're top players and they got paid as such. Right.
Whereas Alex Highsmith is obviously not, the top 5 edge rusher in the league. I kind of have a feeling that his number will come in slightly under Cameron Hayward's average yearly value, wink, wink, if you get where I'm going on that. So that kind of played into me settling on a new money average for Highsmith at $15.5035 million. And that would slot him, as things stand right now, as the 13th highest paid edge rusher in the NFL. And I also project that such a contract extension would more than likely be 2 years. I mean, look, if you can get him if you can get the extension 4 years on him at a $15.5 million new money average, do it, but I just have a feeling that we're looking at a possible 2-year extension for Highsmith to give him potentially another bite of the apple ahead of his 30th birthday there. That would make sense. And I have him based on, and look, I don't do these things willy-nilly. I have the past history to go by as far as cash flow on 2-year extensions, with the most recent one being Deontay Johnson last summer. I have a idea on percentages as far as what the signing bonus will be, as in addition to the layout into the first full new year of the contract, which would be this year with if you did it with Highsmith, it would be 2024 would be the first new year. So it's, there's a lot of factors historically that you can look back at and lay these things out, if you
Sure.
get what I'm saying here. And I have him as I think a $15 million signing bonus as part of such a deal. I have a cash flow through 2023 at $16.25 million, through 2024, $25.25 million, and through 2025, a $33.75 million take. Now, when you take out the fact that Highsmith is already due $2.743 million in 2023, that's considered old money. So if this deal came out exactly the way I have it laid out, and fear not, it won't. But I think I might be close here. When you subtract that 2.734 or 2.743 million of old money from the 33.75 total that I have of a new deal, you get a new money total of 31.007 million. And when you divide that by the 2 new years, that's how you come out with a new money average of 15.5035 million. Now, my example has Highsmith's new salary cap charge for 2023 at being a tick over 6.458 million. And that would equate to an increase of, where is it here? A little more than 3.5 million increase in his salary cap charge from what it is listed now. And that's obviously well within the range to make it work, here. So that's where I'm at on him. And if they do get and here's something else to remember about the cash flow. We just talked about 25.25 million through 2024. Some people in the comments say, "Oh, there's no way he'll Highsmith would take that deal." You got the threat of the franchise tag there, and how many times over the years have we talked about using the franchise tag as a weapon?
It happened with Bud Dupree.
Right. So, and I think right now the estimated franchise tag for linebackers next year, if I can find my notes here, is something like right now it's projected to be 20.062 million. So if you take, let's say he doesn't take a deal this offseason. All right, he's scheduled to make the whatever I said, 6, what is it? Let me go back up here. 2.743 million in 2023. That's what he's on the books to earn in cash this year. And if you take the supposed $20.062 million franchise tag amount for 2024, as it's currently, slated to be, and we won't know what that number is until ahead of the new league year next year. Well, you get a hair over 20, almost 23 million. In fact, those two numbers come out to 22.085 million. And that's only if he stays healthy in 2023 and obviously has a productive season to kind of force the tag there. He has a ceiling on him via the tag of 22.085 million. And there's a lot of ifs obviously involved in that. Whereas if he took the deal that I have laid out for him, he would stand to earn 16.25 million now in 2023 and a total of 25.25 million through next year. Now, the only thing guaranteed in this deal would be the first year money.
Well, that's what I was going to ask about. Is how did you reckon with the whole, should the second year be guaranteed the way it was for Watt? I mean, obviously Highsmith's not Watt, but he's not, a backup either.
I don't think they would break the rule with the first year guaranteed money. I think it would just be the 16.25. Now I did build into this thing roster bonuses for March of 2024 and 2025 as part of the total deal. So that would stand to earn him another $2.5 million by next March, which would then take his total up to 19 million. What I think that'd be almost $19 million, $18.75 million by next March that he would stand to earn. Now there would obviously probably be some injury skill guarantee of some of that 2024 money. And in fact, it'll probably be, if the deal got done exactly the way I have it laid out, and rest assured it won't, but if it did, it would probably be initially reported at, I don't know, 18.75 guarantee, even though only 16.25 million of that would be fully guaranteed. I wouldn't envision them breaking I could be wrong, obviously, but I wouldn't envision them breaking the first year guarantee the fully guaranteed amount of the first year and going past that as part of such a deal.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily either, but you wonder if it's one of those sticking points in a deal and this one's got a lot of layers to it because it's not so obvious, top of the class, the way that Minka was, the way that TJ Watt was, where you kind of have your baseline floor number and you're just kind of working on the rest of the details from there. And so I just wonder how that approach will go. Would Highsmith's camp take a hard stance on really trying to get that second year deal, fully guaranteed? Probably not, but who knows? That's just kind of the one thing I wonder in thinking about this deal.
And once again, the Steelers say, okay, you have a nice run at the tag.
Sure. Yeah, that's their ultimate, comeback there. So I think it's a good outlook. It's a good framework overall. And I just be curious to know when this could happen too. I mean, could a deal come sooner the way that Minka's deal happened last June, or will this thing be a midnight type of deal?
Yeah, that's the and how would he treat it as a soft, one of those soft hold-ins or whatnot, right. and those guys, you couldn't blame him if he did, right?
Sure, that's become commonplace. He just watched TJ Watt do it and get paid, so it's hard to be mad at the guy for it.
And then you have the Steelers probably wanting to do more than likely. Just in theory, because the whole injury and training camp and all, they probably say, can we get this done maybe later in the summer? But if we learned anything about last offseason, right, it was Omar wanted those out of the way, except for obviously Deontay, which they ended up getting done
pretty early.
Fairly early, right?
Yeah, I think they wanted Deontay to go through camp and not miss the entire summer, the way that TJ Watt did 2 years ago. And so Deontay got done mid-camp, and I think for Highsmith, that might be their target as well.
I'd like to see it done early.
Sure. I mean, for a fan perspective,
he's the only guy that you have on the docket, right?
Yeah, and obviously coming off a great season. So I think this deal could be trickier, though, just trying to align all the numbers and the slotting. I think there's a lot of layers to try to agree upon here.
All right, talk to me about the new money average that I have, a little hair over 15.5, which would make him, as things currently sit, slotted 13th highest paid.
That seems reasonable. I mean, I hadn't spent a lot of time digesting, and I don't know what other guy. Are there any potential edge rushers who might get paid this summer? Anyone else that's up for a deal and extension? Is
a Bosa due or no?
I don't know. I mean, I imagine that's going to be in a different category of deal anyway. So that probably wouldn't impact Highsmith. But is there any I guess tier 2, top 10, top 15 guy? I don't know. I have not looked at all, but those are things I look at because obviously everyone's trying to compete and get more than what the last guy got.
Right. I don't know. I think 49ers and Bosa, right? But that's going to be a top of the market value.
Watt money on him.
Right. So. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, but in terms of the
who would
actual
be there.
slotting, yeah, 13th. I mean, I think that's reasonable. I didn't have a particular number in mind. Maybe I was thinking a bit higher at, I don't know, 17 million, but I really hadn't spent much time thinking about what that number, could be, should be, would be right now, because I know that deal's not going to happen for at least 3 months and probably longer than that. But I would say right outside top 10. Now, I'm sure Highsmith, what is 10th? Because everyone's trying to get that top 10 money, getting that actual single digit or 10th spot. What is the 10th highest paid number currently?
17 million, Shaquille Barrett.
Okay. I bet you Highsmith is going to want it.
Him and Chandler Jones.
Okay. I bet you the Highsmith camp's going to try to angle for just over 17. And then, Pittsburgh might come in at 15, and can you meet in the middle the way that you outlined? Might be just the dance they dance.
And once again, as part of that study that I did back in January, I came in between 15 and 17.25 million.
Okay. So you're still confident a deal will get done despite all the details and all the things to hammer out?
I'll be surprised if a deal doesn't get done. And really the only question I have at this point is we're within that 15 to 17.25 million new money, average. Will it be? And will it be a 2-year extension, a 3-year extension, or a 4-year extension?
Okay. Yeah. All good questions. And I think you laid that out, exceptionally well, as always. So now we'll just kind of sit back and wait. Is this kind of the last Highsmith projection you'll have until something gets done, or is there maybe something else you'll think about?
This is one of those round to it's, get around to it. And I finally got around to it, and I posted it the other day because of it had been several weeks since I laid out what I thought his new money average might be this offseason, and I just had to sit down and compare some contracts and fill in the spreadsheet and all. And I did do that. So this is, unless something drastically changed, which I don't know what that would be, this will be probably my one and only stab at it.
All right. Good deal. I think it's a good take and a good thought, and we'll see how it compares. And hopefully a deal gets done so that we can compare it. That's just kind of the ultimate goal.
All
right. What else do we have here? I had a post to go up this morning on Steelers Depot. And I think I might have done something similar in the past, but always good to revisit. And I know it's, the caveat of the partial new regime and Omar Khan, Andy Weidel, but just to look, because the pre-draft visitor list is filling up so quickly. I've gotten some questions about pre-draft visits and draft history. So just looked over the last 5 years, or at least the 5 applicable years, 2016 through 2019 and 2022 at the pre-draft visit list. There really weren't any in 2020 or 2021 due to the pandemic. It was all virtual or anything, or nothing at all, I should say. And so since 2016, it's been 122 known pre-draft visitors for the Steelers, and the Steelers have drafted 11 of those 122 names. That's 9%. That does sound low, but just given the math of it all, you're never going to be able to, draft all the guys you bring in for visits. I think it's a pretty, important number. And in 4 of those 5 years, Pittsburgh has drafted at least 2 of their pre-draft visitors, 2018 being the only exception. So all of that to say is, if you're going to put together a Steelers mock draft and you're trying to get it as close to accurate and right and maybe quote unquote successful as possible, I would probably put at least 2 of those pre-draft visit names on that list. And generally, it's going to be 3rd round and beyond. Typically, 1st round, Tomlin, Colbert / GM. That's the direction you want to go. 2nd round, kind of more positional coach. And then 3rd round beyond is going to be, pre-draft visits, especially into day 3. So that's kind of the way that you should build your mock draft.
And then to add on to that, especially from, let's say, round 3, or at least round 4 and on, it would be a good idea if the people that you have in your mock draft, if they're not even if they are a pre-draft visitor, were they Senior Bowl? Were they one of the 3 major All-Star games? Were they Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, or NFLPA Bowl?
Yeah. Do you know the exact number? You've done a study on that in the past.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
There's, on average, I think it's something like 5 to 6, at least 5 a class, that if they weren't underclassmen, obviously they were at one of those 3 All-Star games.
I just wonder how many guys have they drafted who weren't at any of those, because most seniors are at one of those games just because the number is so large, a couple hundred players that are eligible for the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, NFLPA Bowl. But I just wonder, I'm sure there's a couple, I mean, either because somebody got hurt, somebody was just completely under the radar and overlooked. But I wonder how many all-star game guys they've drafted on anywhere in the draft, excluding, of course, underclassmen.
Was Presley Harvin? He was at one of those, wasn't he?
I couldn't tell you for sure.
NFLPA. There's not many of them if they weren't underclassmen.
Okay. Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. So that's certainly also good to keep in mind. Another question I had was, and I'm just kind of spitballing, will the Steelers under Omar Khan draft more small school guys? You saw Cody Mock come in from North Dakota State. You just kind of wonder, Andy Weidel was a small school guy. He went to Villanova. You just kind of wonder if this team's going to be more willing to dip their toe into that water. Kevin Colbert pretty much against the idea. It happened, but not often. I think 7 draft picks in his entire tenure of FCS players and below. So you wonder if that thought will change under that partial new regime.
What do you consider Sutton Smith out of Northern Illinois?
Well, I mean, he's non-Power 5, but basically when I say small school for the purpose of the study was FCS and below, non-Division I, non-FBS.
Yeah, I guess the most notable of recent times would have been Javon Hargrave, right?
Yeah, I can try to pull up the entire list of the FCS guys during the Colbert tenure. And again, I know the Khan is there, but you still have 2 of the 3 decision makers still being the same in Mike Tomlin and Art Rooney II. But the list of small schoolers under Kevin Colbert: 04 with Ricardo Coakley from Tusculum, 06 Willie Colon Hofstra, 2011 Cortez Allen the Citadel, 2013 Nick Williams Sanford, 2014 Robert Blanchflower from UMass, 2016 Javon Hargrave, South Carolina State, and 2022 with Chris Oladokin from South Dakota State. And so those are all but one, all but Coakley were day 3 picks, and 3 of those, Williams, Blanchflower, and Oladokin, were 7th round picks. So when they happen, it was rare, and it almost always happened on day 3, and usually very late in the draft. Will that change it to Khan? Maybe. We'll just have to wait and see.
Okay.
All right. Anything else here to talk about, Dave? You watch any prospects lately? Anyone kind of you're doing homework on? We got some time here. Maybe discuss any prospects you've been watching.
Yeah. Like I talked about, watched a little bit of Tune. Let me see who else. Where's the tracker at here?
You said, did you watch any of Martin, or you just kind of got the bio on?
I just watched just like 3 plays of him.
Okay.
I did watch a little bit more of Harrison, and seems to be a little bit better pass protector maybe than what I thought originally with him. The good news with him, I don't think he had many penalties, at least not last season. Who else did I watch? I haven't watched any Zavalia yet. Have you watched any of Zavalia?
Not yet, no.
I'm trying to see if anybody else on this list that I have watched recently. No. And I haven't got to Tanner Engel yet, but I view him. He's probably going to be more of a 7th round or undrafted guy, right? Out of NC State.
Yeah, that kind of feels late day 3 priority free agents, probably going to be the story on Tanner Engel.
No, I think so at least where it comes to pre-draft visitors go, I'm all pretty much caught up for the most part.
Okay.
For the names that I mentioned.
Yeah, some of the profiles I've had: Antoine Green from UNC, the receiver. I compared him to actually former Steeler Deion Kane, just a vertical guy that's pretty unrefined, and Green didn't have great production in terms of consistency and volume. Had some medical concerns as well. I mentioned Roschon Johnson, a big fan of him. I actually compared Roschon Johnson to James Conner. I think I see a lot of similarities in their game in terms of that kind of defensive mentality. Remember, Conner played defensive end very briefly at Pitt, and Johnson was a great special teams guy at Texas. They're not super long speed guys, but they got power. And they can pass protect, they can catch. And so I just like their overall skill sets and size. Some guys that I'm not as high on, Andre Yosevas from Princeton, got the profile on him going up in a couple of days. He's going to get a lot of comparisons to Christian Watson because they're the height, weight, speed, small school guys. And I get that to a degree, but I just don't know if Yosevas, despite the really good workout on tape, was quite as freaky as those numbers suggest. And then I also wanted to get to a guy that also had freaky workout numbers that really kind of got some headlines, was Michigan State linebacker Ben Van Sumeren. who's a former running back at Michigan, transferred, played linebacker at Michigan State. I mean, he had, what are his numbers? I mean, they are just off the charts good. I don't know if you've heard about that whenever they had that Spartans workout, but 6'2", 231, ran a 4.45, had a 10.11 broad, 42.5-inch vertical, 29 bench press, like really freaky stuff. And you wonder, why is this guy not getting talked about? You turn on the tape, this guy's super raw. I mean, his processing is terrible. I mean, he's just really new to the position and struggling and does not play to that time speed. So good athlete, but not much of a linebacker. There's a lot of room to grow with him. So he's an undrafted type of guy.
All right. What led you to him?
The workout numbers. I mean, he runs 4.45, 42.5-inch vertical for a linebacker. I know that during the pro day, cycle, when we're doing our scouting and looking for Steelers scouts, I know he had gotten some buzz, but I said, okay, let's turn on the tape here. Let's kind of look at some later round guys and see what there is with him. There is some talent and some traits, but he is just so far away from contributing.
All right. Look forward to reading that one.
All right, Dave, that's going to probably wrap up all the news here. Let's get to a couple of reader emails and close out today's show.
All right, let's start with David Ricards here. Dave and Alex, as always, thank you for your work and the entire Depot team. Best coverage out there, and it's not close. Thank you, David. He says, my question, what do you see in Dotson's tape that took us from the optimism after his rookie year to the state of affairs even prior to the signing of the two guards this offseason? I have to wonder if he just couldn't adjust to Pat Meyer's techniques, or if he's just been quietly injured. The turnover at offensive line coach probably didn't help either. He says, my prediction, as much as I'd love to see them grab a top tackle, he says, I don't think Tomlin and Rooney value the position historically, and thus we'll watch them take a tackle between rounds 2 and 4, not at 32. I could see a kid with positional flexibility who plays the run better than pass protection. They said they tried Chooks out at left tackle at camp and let the rookie take reps at right tackle. Second bit may be a long shot, he says, but I think Chooks is a better fit on the left if the transition is a feasible one. Wasn't the plan before Zach Banner went down a few years ago. Thanks again. You guys are the best. What would you say is the main thing with Dotson that's kind of seemingly caused him to fall out of favor outside of the penalties?
Yeah, well, that's certainly one of them. I mean, I had that video mid-season that he was the most frustrating player on this team. Not the worst player, because the frustration, if like he was just bad and you wouldn't be frustrated, you would just say, oh, he's not a good player. You're not expecting him to play well. You see some flashes. You see some really good moments on tape. He got better the back half of the year. Run blocking has always kind of been his calling card. But I think just technically speaking, he kind of has been a mess. And I think, as the reader mentioned, in this Pat Meyer system that has really more aggressive pass sets, Dotson never really looked comfortable there. Even stuff like, and maybe I was reading into it too much, but in Meyer's system, basically, if the center's sliding to you, the guard's going to go help the tackle, and the center's going to take the defensive tackle 1v1. And they would do that with James Daniels all the time. They really would not do that with Kevin Dotson. They would just kind of have Dotson sit and not help the tackle that much. And so I just don't think schematically, with the independent hands, with those aggressive sets, I think Dotson never really looked comfortable, just never looked like that was something that was natural to him. Not even the way that James Daniels was uncomfortable to start the year, but got much better and was really comfortable and did well the last half of the season. So I just don't think he was or is the right scheme fit for Pittsburgh.
All right, it'll be interesting. I mean, obviously with their offseason acquisitions and all like that, it certainly seems like the writing's on the wall with him.
Yeah, definitely does.
As far as his prediction goes there, I mean, we'll see, David. As we mentioned just a little while ago, two tackles in the door so far, and as far as pre-draft visitors go, we'll see if that list builds a little bit here in the final week and a half or whatnot. And the other two tackles that you would think that they would like, Paris Johnson and Broderick Jones, I think most seem to figure will be off the board at 17. I know you did write and finally get around to write an article that if the Steelers did trade up, it would probably be for one of those two guys, right? But whether they will or not, obviously yet to be seen.
Yeah, that was really just an extension of the conversation that we had for people that may not listen to the podcast as religiously as maybe some other people do, as opposed to the ones that read the site. So just wanted to kind of get those thoughts out there in text-based form. Yeah, I'm not going to guarantee it. And I said, most likely I'm not going to be certain of anything. Could they trade up for Brzee or Joey Porter Jr.? Sure, all that's possible. But I think just makes the most amount of sense to go get that high priority left tackle and Paris Johnson, Broderick Jones. Those would be the names to target. But again, Johnson's going to probably be a top 10 pick and Jones may not make it to 17.
As far as his assertion goes, that potentially that they would take one outside of pick 17 and pick 32. I mean, I think it's plausible, obviously.
I think, I guess the question is, what is the floor to take a tackle? Is it 49?
I think it's 49.
Okay.
And I think, once again, what does the pre-draft process end up doing to Dawan Jones, if anything? Sure.
And I think, again, logistically, it's a little bit tougher to see how the pieces fit with Jones being really more of a right tackle as opposed to an Anton Harrison, who I think kind of has a better fit to compete with Dan Moore at left tackle. Not saying you can't draft a Dawan Jones. You can make it work if the talent's there. You'll figure it out. But I do think logistically it's harder to get that right tackle type started than that left tackle guy.
Adam Gesk writes in, why is everyone so convinced the team is moving towards a mauling run blocking line? The only starter that Khan Weidel have added is Sayamalu, is listed at 303 pounds, which is very light and is graded better as a pass blocker each of the past 4 years. That being said, we are moving in. If we are moving in that direction, then why then is the assumption we would sooner replace Dan Moore than a Okorafor? Moore is younger, cheaper, improved last year, while Okorafor stayed stagnant or possibly regressed after 2021. And more to the point, Moore is the better run blocker. Is it just based on the idea that for whatever reason, people believe they like Okorafor?
Well, I would say a couple things. A, go off of Mike Tomlin's comments during the league meetings, and I forget the exact quote. It's not in front of me, but he said something to the effect of, we're not going to be bashful about our intentions. We want to be our team that runs the ball effectively, have a young quarterback, and want to make sure we're not putting too much on his plate. And sure, from the actual signings, I think Sayamalu A is probably not 303 anymore. I think he's considerably heavier than that. And you see the tape. He's a good pass protector, but I think he can certainly run block and maul as well. And also just the guys they've shown interest in. I mean, all the interior offensive linemen from Torrance to Avila to the tackles in Dawan Jones and Darnell Wright, there's a certain type and a certain theme there that they've been really looking at. So, yeah, in terms of the guys that have actually been signed, I mean, Herbig is a mauler as well. He may be a backup, but certainly has that type as well. I think he can just kind of start putting all those tea leaves together before the entire roster gets set post-draft. So that's where I base that off of. From the more Okorafor standpoint, a fair point overall. I think Moore is the better run blocker, but you paid Okorafor, he's getting paid a good amount of money. He's not going to be on the bench.
Exactly. And, barring something really, as we mentioned, I think on the live stream the other night, you've already paid him his roster bonus date is already coming due too. So it would be quite surprising now at this point if they either cut him or traded him.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, if Dan Moore, even if you draft a tackle, Dan Moore becomes a swing tackle, then you got a really quality number 3 swing tackle, I think, if he can get some snaps and get some comfort at right tackle, because that's pretty new to him. So if you had, let's just say, making up names here, Anton Harrison, Chukwuma Okorafor, and Dan Moore as your top 3 tackles, it looks a whole lot better than it did, I think, a year ago.
Craig Sampson writes in, great offseason coverage. Couple of questions. Restructuring contracts, for example, if I work at a specific salary, my income tax is a specific rate. But when I got a signing bonus to come to work for a company, or when I get a company bonus at the end of the year, it is taxed almost half of the amount, like 40 to 50%. So when guys restructure to have their base salary converted to bonus, do they take less home because bonuses are taxed at a higher rate? Does it seem?
Answer this one, Dave.
Yeah. I'm not a CPA. Consult your local CPA. Look, I don't know the right answer to this question. I'm going to be upfront and honest, but I know certain states have different laws regarded to, different, what's taxed differently and what's not, and that kind of thing. I will say this. I mean, what you're doing with these restructures though is you're taking money that was already due the player in the year and just moving a classification of that, So I don't know if merely changing the classification of this was a base salary, we're technically giving it to you as a signing bonus, how that changes things. I have a guy that does my taxes. I've had people do my taxes for years. So if you want to talk cap ramifications, I can talk with you for the next hour and a half on that. But I don't know the tax. Reach out, Craig. What I would suggest maybe is if you're on Twitter, maybe tag Joel Corey in a question. Maybe he can answer that for you better. I don't have a clue within that. Look, here's the thing. You see players all around the league every offseason restructure their contracts. So it happens, and the ramifications must not be that serious if it's happening at the frequency rate that it is happening. That's all I can say about that.
Yeah, that was the only answer I was going to be able to provide. Was I can't think there would be that kind of penalty because these things are so common and to the point, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes they're basically written into the contract that if a player was getting so severely harmed by, the way that it's taxed on the bonus, players will not be open to restructuring. It wouldn't happen, hardly ever, if at all. And so I got to think there's a provision, a way that it excludes that from being taxed at a heavier rate. So I don't know the answer for that for sure, obviously, but I can't think that would be a serious problem. Now,
if you're talking about maybe a new contract and then the first year, something, maybe that's treated different.
Yeah. And now that's also paid out over time, typically, too. It's not generally one lump sum the player gets. It's installments.
And I think generally you're right there. It's over the 17, 18-week period. Some teams might, because they have to escrow that money and all like that. So that's another thing. But Joe Corey has told me in the past that a lot of teams will put that signing bonus just basically as a weekly payment.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've even heard teams that'll pay some, at the start of the year, then after the year, you get another kind of check. I think it was different systems. So right. I think when you hear somebody say they get a $12 million signing bonus, largely speaking, you don't get a $12 million, deposit in your bank account the second you sign that contract. It's broken up over time, usually for cash reasons too, just so you don't have to try to fork over $12 million cash all at once. So that may also play a role in how those things are taxed. Also, is it true in the NFL like other sports where you get taxed based on the location you're playing? So road games, you're taxed on based that state income tax and all that kind of stuff?
I think I have read something on that in the past. I don't have that in front of me. But
I know it's true for baseball, basketball, the tax, ramifications are it's based partially off of the location you're playing. So if you're in a road game in Florida versus New York or whatever, you're taxed differently.
Yeah, I have read something related. I don't remember the specifics on that. Number 2, he says, if the Steelers had the number 1 pick this year and couldn't trade, who would you as a Steelers GM take based on need and talent? Who is that non-miss prospect, even with Jalen Carter having issues? Oh, man, I haven't really.
Some big questions here.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of you would have a never-ending debate about quarterbacks. Would you stick with Kenny Pickett? Would you take one of the top-tier quarterbacks in this class? My first thought goes to Will Anderson, and I understand you have Highsmith and T.J. Watt. I just think Anderson is the best player in this year's draft, by far. I mean, just the dominance he had at Alabama was just off the charts. So you have to figure out how to work all these guys, but I mean, it's a good problem for me to have. So you made me answer that. My first thought is a very simple one. Don't overthink it. Take the best player in the draft, and that player is Will Anderson.
And if Jalen Carter hadn't having the issues that he's having, he would probably be the one.
Yeah, I still feel like I'm a little down on Carter, even not considering some of the off the field stuff. Just, I like Jordan Davis last year, still like Jordan Davis, but these guys going to be premier pass rushers getting 8 sacks a season. Obviously, they're going to impact the game in different ways. I still think personally, even just from a talent level, I would take Anderson over Carter.
Okay. Interesting decision, Carter and Drew Rosenhaus, or at least supposed stance that they're taking with not wanting to visit with teams outside the top 10, right?
Yeah, it's some posturing. I'm not sure if it's. I still think he's a top 10 pick. I don't know if that's the way that I would go about it, but hey, he's Shoe Rosen. Should mention, by the way, Dan Moore switched agents. Does that mean anything to you? Dan Morse now has a different representation.
he better up the output. Look, they can't do anything with him this offseason. You know, he's got to play one more season before he can start even thinking about an extension.
Right. So I wonder what the reason was, or something obviously he wasn't happy with.
Yeah. I don't know the true reason. Only he can answer that, but it's not related to him getting a contract this offseason. I can unequivocally tell you that, because rules in the CBA state that, you know, you got to have the 3 seasons in.
Yeah. I wonder if he's just thinking ahead. You know, I want to pick a guy a year out and have a good relationship and feel comfortable before I hire a guy, right before I'm trying to get potentially a deal. But of course, will extension even happen? I mean, you know, that's a whole nother conversation.
Number 3 says, if you were the Steelers GM, would you have gone quarterback last year, or would you have chosen players to build around a future quarterback? So if we drafted a quarterback this year or next, our roster would be set. He says, I would have preferred the latter, build a team around a quarterback, then draft a quarterback, I think he's saying. I mean, did you know exactly what this year's quarterback class would be before, you know, a year ago? You know, that's the age old people always say, well, next year's class. I mean, you don't really know. I mean, that's I understand why they did what they did. I understand why Kenny Pickett. It's so hard to look back in the rearview mirror now at this point, you know?
Yeah, it's all spilled milk to me. You know, I admit I wasn't as high on Kenny Pickett. He was not my number 1 quarterback, and I was a Malik Willis fan, and, you know, that's not looking true and accurate right now, but we'll see how careers go. I always just had because we got this question a lot last year, you know, why take a quarterback in 2022? The 23 class is going to be so good. I don't like thinking that way because there are so many variables, so much unknown. Will you be in a position to pick one of those guys? Will those quarterbacks pan out the way that we thought? What guys will emerge? No one was talking about Anthony Richardson a year ago, and he's going to be a top 5 type pick. So it's all spilt milk to me. I mean, you know, Pickett's the guy, and that's kind of my focus.
You know, I guess the question becomes, who else would you have taken? You know, and we do this exercise after every draft every year of having people, you know, pick from the slot of players in between picks of who they would have taken over X guy. I mean, who you know, maybe Tyler Linderbaum, you know, because he went 25th to the Ravens, and obviously Pickett went 20th to the Steelers. Who else would have been in
it's a good question
in the conversation there?
I'm not sure. I'd have to go back. I think last year I was so quarterback focused. I just didn't know what quarterback it was going to be, was always my thought. So yeah, there really weren't, I don't know if any other candidates that were super, you know, in that mix last year, because we knew they were taking a quarterback.
Right. So, I mean, if I would answer the question with another question, who Craig, who would you have taken before the Steelers took, you know, of the players that went before the Steelers took George Pickens? Who of those players, after, you know, between Pickett and all, would you have drafted there? That, you know,
right.
That's probably a good counter argument to that. One last one from Jason Smith. Hello, Dave and Alex, longtime listener and second-time emailer. While listening to your discussion on the slot corner position Monday, is it possible for Trey Norwood to play slot over Millette in obvious passing downs? It would alleviate the need for that slot corner type if he were able to.
Yeah, it's possible. He was trying to do some of that early in his career. His rookie year, I think he was trying to play some slot, and I think it was a bit too much on his plate, and so he kind of reverted back to playing in dime and had a pretty effective rookie season. Just had a really disappointing 2022. Didn't make that jump. His tackles were through the roof, and, you know, really was phased out of the defense once Casey got healthy after the bye, and so he's kind of fighting for that roster spot in 2023, let alone trying to carve out a role. So is the skill set there to do that in passing downs? Yeah, I think it's there, but you just saw some regression last year, and you're not sure, you really can't count on that. So he's in the mix. He's a name to consider, absolutely. but he's a guy to me that just has to make the team first.
All right, I lied. There's one last one here from Greg. Enjoying regular conversations about the Steelers. Thank you, guys. I keep hearing a throwaway line. Well, we really don't know what we have in Calvin Austin. Can one of you tell me what this really means? And he goes on to say, you don't know what you have in any draft picks until they get on the field, but they don't draft the same position in the fourth round that they drafted in the second round because they don't know what they have in their second round pick. Do you have any reason to believe Calvin Austin is not the same guy they drafted last year? He says, P.S. Alex, there is no Z in Clemson.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not going to be able to correct that.
I do that as well, I think, too. So he says, all the best to you and your team. Look, here, here's just what I'm trying to say about Calvin Austin is basically that's been primarily with you don't really know what you have in Calvin Austin is because, I mean, you got a kid, too, that's coming off a foot injury.
A speed guy, yeah.
A speed guy coming, and we don't, what I mean by that is we don't know what this team has in Calvin Austin in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform. All we have, and there might be nothing that's changed. Okay. Maybe our same thoughts of what we thought Calvin Austin was coming out of college will rubber stamp that right into next year. But Alex just got to see him a little bit in training camp. I didn't get to see him in the Steelers uniform at all. And then now there's a whole foot injury on a speed guy. And then plus he's a little bit undersized too. It was a little bit peculiar based on what the Steelers have done over the years when it comes to the actual size of Calvin Austin.
I think his point, though, is everyone says you got to draft a receiver because you don't know what you have in Calvin Austin. But
I don't say they have to draft one. I have said I would like them to get a bigger someone that they can interchange with, because I do struggle with the fact, and look, they're going to move guys around and all like that, but I do struggle with the fact of seeing Calvin Austin playing a lot of run snaps in the slot.
Well, I think
in 11.
What I was getting at was people are saying to draft a receiver, they should draft a receiver, strongly consider it because you don't know what you have in Austin. But the reader's point is you obviously don't know what you have in the rookie either because he won't have hit the field either. So point taken there. I make a reference.
It's all projection.
Yeah, I make a reference to that in my terrible take today. But I'll answer that and kind of counter that by saying you want to have options. You don't want to put all your eggs in the Calvin Austin basket because he's 1 year in the NFL. Off the foot injury for a speed guy, you don't, if he is not the guy and you got to turn to someone else, who do you turn to? You really don't have that name right now. So the more options you have, the more competition you have, the more flexibility that you have. Even if Austin's a good player and he breaks his arm in the summer, whatever happens, you need to have a plan B there and give yourself some flexibility. And if the worst case is Austin's a good player and the guy you draft is a good player, you can make that work. Let's all celebrate having good draft picks and good players and too much talent on this offense. So you want to just give yourself a backup plan and another option there on top of Austin would be the reason why you would still go get a receiver.
And look at how the depth chart has changed since Austin was drafted. And look where they sit now. How many people honestly thought that when Calvin Austin III was drafted, that this time this year that Chase Claypool still wouldn't be on the roster for starters.
Yeah, right. Figured he would be here.
And then second, this offseason so far, Steven Sims is gone. You don't know what's going to happen with Miles Boykin, who was on the roster last year. What the hell is going to happen with Gunnar Olszewski? Mm-hmm. What else is on the roster here? And let's say even Calvin Austin is that can be exactly whatever people had in their heads of what they thought he could be in a Steelers uniform, that comes to fruition. Then what do you have behind him? And even if you bring back Miles Boykin, who primarily his best attribute is he's available and he can play special teams. But what even has Miles Boykin done in the NFL outside of give you some good special teams play?
He had some success early in Baltimore on offense, but really has become a pure special teamer his last year or two with the Ravens. And then this year in Pittsburgh, he caught one pass, I think, when Pittsburgh this year or two. So yeah, he's really not, and he's not a slot guy either. So, he's a special teams guy at this point in his career.
I mean, if you honestly can sit here and tell me that you're happy with Gunnar Olszewski and potentially Miles Boykin to round out the depth chart behind Calvin Austin, then okay, don't draft a wide receiver. But I think that they can upgrade that room, and especially with a player that can be versatile.
Yeah, I know Anthony Miller's there too, but he's not been productive in a couple of years. Missed all last year with a shoulder injury, so he's back, but he's going to just compete for that spot. So the more depth you have, more options you have, the better off you'll be. I
don't think they have to draft one. I would like to see them draft one, and one that can play in the slot that's a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I still, and not to belabor the point, but are they going to go with a big slot? They're going to go. I think Jaden Reed's a perfect fit because he's got a bit of size, but he's not a huge guy. They can still work in the receiver run game and all that motion. And he's really versatile and a good blocker and a good effort guy. I think Jaden Reed is the perfect type of receiver Pittsburgh can have in the slot.
Sure.
So
I have no argument. I'm just saying that I can see it being a big slot guy.
Yeah, I think I have a harder time seeing it than where you're at right now.
Okay.
But we'll see.
But and once again, this is no slight against. I'm not slighting Calvin Austin. I mean, his college tape once again, especially after the catch, and he can give you that deep threat. He can move around in the offense. I mean, hopefully, he is exactly that guy coming out.
Yeah, I think the Raiders' point was just about the rookie being as unproven as Calvin Austin would be.
Sure.
Kind of the funny part of saying that.
Sure, you never know what you have in any of these guys until they hit the field.
Right. That's why the draft is, art, not science.
Okay. I think we've got everything here, and we even hit on some topics we didn't know that we were going to hit on there in the pre-production meeting. So, we'll be back.
Real quick, there's just on Friday. I mentioned the Friday podcast will be the part 1 of the draft roundtable. Hopefully, have 1 or 2 of those before the draft. Let me pull up the names that will be on Friday's show, barring any sort of change. It'll be Joe Camarotto, Ross McCorkle, Owen Straley, and Tyler Wise will be on Friday's show with Dave and myself.
We'll definitely be talking about some wide receivers and some defensive backs with those guys, won't we?
Definitely.
All right. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do, want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button, upper right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button, upper right navigational bar. Follow the directions that way. Still got a lot of draft profiles coming in, and we generally try to post, I don't know, anywhere between 25 and 35 posts a day to help keep people entertained. I am getting about tired of mock draft season, though, so I'm not going to be sad to see that come to an end, but it is interesting to see some of the major media angles at this and all as well. So until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.